We bring in now Julie Kelly, who has been right on everything, on with us for years. Julie, before we get into what's coming next, what do you think so many people out there who were told, oh, Trump's going to go to prison for the rest of his life. Oh, my goodness, he had no right to do any of this. Supreme Court has come out and said, actually, much of this was occurring within his presidential authority. I think that's an important precedent that they've set, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. And now Jack Smith is like a rat on a sinking ship that's scurrying to try to get on a lifeboat. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary to see all of this just come spiraling down around him. What happens next?
What a humiliating and deserving end, of course, we have to say, for Jack Smith and his team of prosecutorial thugs in Florida and in Washington. But let's pause for a moment that NBC News broke into programming. This is the sort of stuff that used to be reserved for, like, if a president was shot or we went to war, not because a corrupt prosecutor was forced to drop a weak 4-count indictment against a former and incoming president. But this reflects the media's obsession with this and how much it means to them, how devastating it is to the regime media and Democrats that this is over. So, again, Jack Smith today filing in Washington, dismissing the 4-count indictment against the president related to the events of January 6th. In July, Judge Aileen Cannon already dismissed that indictment in that jurisdiction for, the alleged classified documents case. So now both of these cases are dead letters. For now, I have to note that in his last dirty trick, Jack Smith moved to dismiss the Washington case without prejudice. That means, Clay, you know this as an attorney, that means they sort of reserve it, they kind of, dismiss it, but somebody could bring it back to life later. If you dismiss it with prejudice, it means it's over, done, no one can resuscitate the case. So he's still trying to cling to the belief that this weak 4-count indictment that was gutted by the Supreme Court after its immunity ruling in July somehow is still legitimate. And, except for the fact that he was elected, we would have moved forward with this and won. He would not have. So now it's time to turn the tables, as we've talked about. Jack Smith and his team must be investigated, and this must happen by a Trump DOJ and Republicans in the House and Senate. You need accountability for what has been done here, for the lies that have been told to the American people, and to make sure that these bad actors are held accountable. And so this never happens again to a Republican or a Democrat president.
Julie, I think it's important now that the full counting from 2024, 3 weeks later, is done, to remember what was the impetus behind much of these charges was a belief that Joe Biden didn't get 81 million legal votes.
Correct.
Now that we have seen 2016 and 2020 and 2024 in their totality, Kamala got 7 million less votes than Joe Biden did. Does the math add up to you? I'm telling everybody out there today, the math doesn't add up to me. Does anybody actually still believe that Joe Biden got 81 million legitimate votes?
I mean, I think Joe Biden does. I think,
well, his brain doesn't work. But I mean, Julie, like, I wanted to withhold because I wanted to see what happened in 2024, and I wanted to see the full tally. I didn't want to jump out the day after and be like, oh, Kamala got 11 million less votes or whatever the tally was. We've got 3 weeks of counting. She's going to be 7 million behind. I think a big part of this is suddenly I think people are going to be able to put their heads up and say, yeah, I don't know that the math adds up here.
Absolutely correct. And I think that graph that was going around a few days after Election Day was really shocking and illuminating. The bar graph as to what the vote totals were in 2016, then this huge spike in 2020 for Democrats, then sort of returning back to normal. So this is why Donald Trump said last week that he will fire everyone, Jack Smith and his team, they've already said they're going to resign before Donald Trump takes office. But he also will deploy resources in the DOJ to investigate the 2020 election. And all, again, Clay, the lies that we were told by everyone from Attorney General Bill Barr at the time to then the acting Attorney General, Jeffrey Rosen, top DOJ and FBI officials who insisted there was no evidence of voting fraud, and furthermore, claimed that they had conducted investigations when we later found out there was no DOJ investigations into these various states and voting fraud. So I think that given the results of 2024, it is fair for the president now to look into really what happened, because we strongly believe the election was stolen. We see what has happened to our country in the wake of Biden's stolen presidential election. And again, we are entitled to the truth, one way or the other. We just want to know exactly what happened, what didn't happen, to, just like with Jack Smith, make sure it does not happen again.
What should happen to Jack Smith?
Well, first of all, I implore Charles Grassley, the incoming Senate Judiciary Committee chairman, to send a letter directly to Jack Smith and his team, telling them not to leave the country. As we've talked about, Clay, Jack Smith, and one of his prosecutors, David Harbach, were at The Hague overseeing criminal prosecution of the former Kosovo president on war crimes. There are rumors that he plans to resign and then quickly return to The Hague. He should not leave the country. And I think that's something that Charles Grassley, the senator from Iowa, needs to warn Jack Smith and his team not to leave, because they need a full-blown investigation into the special counsel's office. What I reported, what happened in the Florida case specifically, tampering with evidence, destruction of evidence, obstructing investigations, threatening witnesses and lawyers, which is what Jay Bratt did, and proven conspiracy, Clay, between the National Archives, the DOJ, and the Biden White House to concoct some sort of documents case against Donald Trump as early as the spring of 2021. We saw the records, we saw the correspondence between those three entities, and the idea that Joe Biden's White House was somehow insulated from the two unprecedented criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump just does not match the evidence and even some of Joe Biden's own public statements. So there's a lot to dig into here. And, you know, it's very tough for prosecutors to go after prosecutors, but that's not what Jack Smith was. He was a dirty Democratic operative. This guy is the biggest loser in DOJ history. The Supreme Court unanimously overturned his political conviction of Bob McDonnell and his wife. He did not get a single conviction in the first prosecution of Senator Bob Menendez. He did not get a conviction of Senator John Edwards. He was rebuked by the Supreme Court 3 times this year in the immunity ruling, the Fisher ruling on 1512c2, and the Supreme Court rejecting his emergency appeal to bypass the D.C. Circuit Court on the immunity ruling and take up that question immediately so they could try to push that case to trial in Washington before the election. He is a loser. He's a rogue Democrat operative disguised as a federal prosecutor, and he must be fully investigated and, yes, probably likely face criminal charges of his own.
If that all happens, it also then implicates, as you just laid out, all of the prosecution of the January 6th defendants. Mm-hmm. You've covered these individuals better than almost anyone in the country. And Donald Trump may have already asked you, but a lot of his staff listens to this show, obviously. What should happen, in your opinion, with the January 6th defendants? Should it be uniform action? Do you think there are some people that have that aren't worthy of of clemency from the president? What would you suggest?
I would say, and I reject the idea that this needs to be a case-by-case review. I think for a handful of defendants, number one, who have criminal histories, or number two, are known informants, confidential human sources, as they're called, which we know there were dozens, perhaps more than 100 involved. Most of them were not charged, but a handful probably were. They should be exempted from pardons or commutations. But even those who are accused of assaulting police and the flimsiest conduct, and of course charges that have never been brought against political protesters in Washington, these still had to go before 100% Democrat juries. They had to go before unhinged partisan judges. I shouldn't even say partisan, because some of the Republican judges were worse than the Democrats. This was such a rigged process that even those accused of violence did not have their constitutional rights honored for due process for a fair jury trial before a jury of their peers, where all of the evidence was produced to the judge or jury. We know over and over judges refuse to enter into evidence exculpatory videos, exculpatory testimony by even federal agents that would have exonerated these defendants. It was rigged time after time. So I strongly support blanket pardon is an easy way to say it, but all of them should be immune, should be exonerated, should be pardoned, should be released from prison. You know, we have Enrique Tarrio in jail for 22 years, Clay, on a seditious conspiracy conviction. He committed no violence. He wasn't even in Washington. But because he was the head of the Proud Boys, the government sought and received by a Trump judge, by the way, Tim Kelly, 22 years in a federal prison. And I'll tell you, I talked to a J6 attorney yesterday. These J6 defendants, former Marines, former law enforcement, are in some of the worst federal prisons in our country with hardened, long-time felons, violent felons, murderers, terrorists, rapists. This is where they are being sent to. It is a travesty at every level, and I don't agree with the tap dancing. With few exceptions, every single J6er should be pardoned, and those who are in prison now should be immediately released from custody.
Julie, keep up the fantastic work. Enjoy maybe a nice beverage of your choice to celebrate Jack Smith officially being finished.
You too.
And I hope that he has to stand and be held accountable for what he did, as well as Merrick Garland, by the way. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Clay. Have a great Thanksgiving.
You too. Julie Kelly, been doing phenomenal work. Glad she could join us here with that breaking news. Trump officially cleared of all federal charges in terms of those cases pending. Buck's out this week for the Thanksgiving holiday. So I want to tell you all about one of his favorite products, the Mantis X, electronic dry fire training device for gun owners. No ammo needed, which is a good thing because ammo can get expensive. Mantis X attaches to your gun like a weapon light. You download the Mantis X app, get real-time feedback on your shooting. Typically, it's like having a trainer with you. Mantis X will give you tips and advice, and you get 94% of you anyway, immediate improvement within the first hour of using it. Get yourself a Mantis X today. You can use it at home in a safe space or on the range. It also makes a great gift idea for the gun owners in your life. Get yours at mantisx.com. That's MANTISX.com.